The world saw perfection. The flawless hair, the confident smile, the girl who always seemed to have a right answer. But behind that image was a story that didn't fit the picture. A story filled with pressure, loneliness, and a battle for identity that began long before the cameras stopped rolling. When audiences think of Maureen McCormick, they think of one name, Marsha Brady, the golden girl from the Brady Bunch. She was the teenager everyone wanted to be, the character that defined wholesome television in the early 1970s. But the truth is, while America was watching Marsha Brady live a picture-perfect life, Maureen McCormick was quietly fighting battles no one could see. Her story begins far from the bright studio lights. Born in California in 1956, she grew up in a household that looked stable on the outside but felt uncertain within. Her mother struggled with mental health issues, and her father, though dedicated, could be emotionally distant. Even as a child, McCormick learned to read moods, to adapt, to perform emotionally in order to keep peace. That instinct, to perform, would later shape her entire life. At 6 years old, she entered a beauty contest and won. For many children, that would be a harmless moment. For McCormick, it became the beginning of a path defined by external validation. Soon, she was appearing in commercials, including a national campaign for Mattel. Producers noticed a natural charm. Casting calls followed. Television appearances came quickly. She appeared in shows like Bewitched, My Three Sons, and I Dream a Genie. Then came the audition that would change everything. In 1969, producer Sherwood Schwartz was searching for the perfect girl to play Marsha Brady. Hundreds auditioned. When McCormick walked in, she radiated confidence and innocence. She got the role at just 12 years old. Overnight, she became a television icon. But fame at that age comes with a cost. On set, she was expected to embody perfection. Perfect posture, perfect smile, perfect tone. Marsha Brady couldn't show cracks, and neither could Maureen. The character became more than a role. It became a standard she felt pressure to live up to. While the show portrayed a blended family filled with warmth and laughter, her real home life grew more complicated. Her mother's mental health worsened. Her father's strict religious focus created tension. The emotional support she needed wasn't always there. So she turned inward. She began questioning who she was beyond the character. As she entered her teenage years, the contrast between her public image and private struggles intensified. She was navigating adolescence under national scrutiny. Every appearance mattered. Every mistake felt magnified. And like many young stars, she began experimenting, first socially, then more seriously. Drug use became an escape. At first, it dulled anxiety. Then it filled emotional gaps. Eventually, it took control. Yet audiences never saw it. On screen, she remained a cheerful Marsha Brady. Off screen, she was battling depression and identity confusion. When the Brady Bunch ended in 1974, McCormick was only 18. Fame had arrived before she had fully formed her own identity. Suddenly, the structure that defined her life disappeared. She tried to transition into new roles, appearing in shows like Happy Days, Fancy Island, and The Love Boat. But casting directors struggled to see beyond Marsha Brady. The character followed her everywhere. She auditioned for more serious roles, including a part in Midnight Express. She poured herself into the performance, hoping to prove her range. She didn't get it. The reason wasn't talent. It was typecasting. The industry couldn't separate the actress from the character. That rejection hit hard. It reinforced her fears that she might never escape the role that made her famous. Her drug use worsened. Her behavior became unpredictable. She missed opportunities. Relationships strained. Hollywood, which had once embraced her, began keeping its distance. She returned to Brady-related projects, including reunion specials and spin-offs. But each return deepened the trap. She was working, yet unable to move forward. The character she once loved had become a shadow she couldn't outrun. Behind the scenes, her life spiraled further. Addiction intensified. She struggled to maintain professional commitments. At times, producers imposed strict conditions just to keep her on set. She later admitted she felt lost, disconnected from herself, unsure of who she was without the identity the world assigned her. But her story didn't end there. Recovery came slowly. She sought help. She entered therapy. She confronted addiction. It wasn't a sudden transformation. It was a gradual rebuilding. Over time, she regained control. She wrote her memoir, opened up about her struggles, and began reshaping her narrative. What makes McCormick's story powerful isn't just the fall, it's the honesty. She revealed how fame can distort identity, how child stardom can freeze perception, and how difficult it is to reclaim individuality after being defined by a single role. Today, when audiences remember Marsha Brady, they often see nostalgia. But behind that nostalgia is a human story about pressure, vulnerability, and resilience. McCormick's journey reflects the cost of early fame and the strength required to rebuild after losing yourself. Because the girl with a perfect smile wasn't perfect at all. She was searching, struggling, growing, and perhaps that's the most important part of her story. Not the fame, not the fall, but the quiet determination to rediscover who she was beyond the role. In the end, Marsha Brady belonged to television history, but Maureen McCormick had to fight to belong to herself. And that fight was a real story behind the smile. The audience saw a symbol of perfection, a teenager who always seemed to glide through life without a flaw, whose confidence felt effortless, whose smile became one of the most recognizable images of the era. But behind that image, reality was far more complicated and far more fragile. When people think about Maureen McCormick, they remember the Golden Girl. They remember Marsha Brady from the Brady Bunch. They remember the catchphrases, the hair, the laughter, the warmth. What they don't always remember is that she was just a child learning to survive in an environment that demanded perfection while offering little room for vulnerability. Her early years shaped that instinct. Growing up in California, she learned quickly that approval mattered. Her mother's struggles with mental health created unpredictability at home. Her father's emotional distance added another layer of tension. For a young girl, performing became a coping mechanism, smiling when things felt uncertain, presenting calm when chaos lurked beneath. That skill translated perfectly to television, but it came at a cost. By the time she entered beauty contests and commercials, she was already linking her self-worth to applause. Winning the San Fernando Valley Beauty Contest wasn't just a childhood memory, it was reinforcement. People praised her when she performed. They admired her when she looked perfect. That connection became deeply ingrained. Television appearances followed. She appeared in small roles in Bewitched, My Three Sons, and I Dream of Jeannie. These were stepping stones, but they also introduced her to a world where children were expected to behave like professionals. Long hours, bright lights, adults making decisions about her appearance and behavior. She adapted, but internally, the pressure built. Then came the role that changed everything. At just 12 years old, she was cast as Marsha Brady. The show quickly became a cultural phenomenon. Audiences fell in love with the blended family dynamic. Marsha became the embodiment of teenage idealism. And with that, McCormick became the face of perfection. But perfection is exhausting to maintain. On set, she had to be cheerful, composed, and consistent. Off set, she was navigating adolescence. Hormones, friendships, insecurities, all the normal struggles amplified by national attention. She wasn't just a teenager, she was America's teenager. That distinction made authenticity difficult. She began to feel disconnected from her own identity. Meanwhile, her home life continued to deteriorate. Her mother's mental health worsened. Her father's strict religious focus created additional tension. The safe space she needed didn't exist. So she turned to something that many young stars eventually encounter: escape. Experimentation with drugs began subtly. It didn't feel dangerous at first. It felt like relief. Relief from expectations. Relief from anxiety. Relief from the constant need to be perfect. But what began as occasional use quickly evolved into dependency. She later admitted that addiction grew while she was still playing Marsha Brady, meaning the brightest years of her fame were also some of her darkest internally. When the show ended in 1974, the transition was brutal. She lost not only a job but an identity. For 5 years, she had been defined by one role. Suddenly, she was expected to redefine herself. Hollywood, however, wasn't ready to let go of Marsha Brady. She landed guest roles in Happy Days, Fantasy Island, and The Love Boat. These appearances kept her visible but didn't change perceptions. Casting directors saw nostalgia, not transformation. The industry boxed her into the role that made her famous. Her audition for Midnight Express represented a turning point. She saw it as a chance to break free from typecasting. She prepared intensely, hoping to prove she could handle dramatic material. When she didn't get the role, it felt like confirmation that Hollywood couldn't see beyond her past. That rejection deepened her insecurity. Addiction worsened. She described a period where drugs dominated her life. Opportunities slipped away. Relationships strained. Her professional reliability became inconsistent. Yet publicly, the nostalgia for Marsha Brady remained strong. The contrast between public affection and private struggle created emotional whiplash. She returned to Brady-related projects, including reunion specials and spin-offs. Each appearance brought financial stability but reinforced typecasting. She felt trapped, needing the work but resenting the identity it reinforced. Eventually, the spiral reached a breaking point. She sought help. Recovery wasn't immediate. It involved therapy, self-reflection, and confronting painful truths. She spoke openly about depression, anxiety, and the difficulty of rebuilding confidence after years of dependency. Her memoir later revealed details that shocked fans. She discussed the pressure of fame, the loneliness of child stardom, and the psychological toll of being defined by a single role. The honesty reshaped public perception. People began seeing her not just as Marsha Brady, but as someone who survived immense personal struggle. Her later career focused less on chasing stardom and more on stability. She appeared in television projects, reality shows, and interviews. Each appearance felt less like a comeback and more like a continuation, a reminder that careers don't always follow dramatic arcs. Sometimes they evolve quietly. What makes her story resonate is its universality. Many child stars face similar challenges. Early fame freezes identity. Audiences resist change. Personal growth becomes difficult when the world insists on nostalgia. McCormick's experience illustrates that struggle vividly. Today, Marsha Brady remains iconic. The hair, the smile, the optimism, all preserved in television history. But behind that image is a deeper narrative about resilience. McCormick didn't just survive fame. She survived losing herself and finding her way back. The girl everyone thought they knew was far more complex. She wasn't just a perfect teenager. She was a young woman navigating pressure, addiction, rejection, and recovery. Her story reminds us that behind every iconic character is a person with a life far richer and more complicated than the role. In the end, the smile that defined an era concealed vulnerability. The perfection audiences admired masked uncertainty. And the legacy of Marsha Brady became only one chapter in a much longer journey. Because sometimes the most powerful stories aren't about fame, they're about survival. And Maureen McCormick's greatest role wasn't on television. It was learning to become herself again after the cameras stopped rolling. The image never changed. Even as the years passed, even as trends shifted and television evolved, the memory remained frozen. The golden-haired teenager, standing confidently in the center square, smiling as if life had no shadows. That image became timeless. But for Maureen McCormick, time never stood still. It moved forward, carrying her through moments of confusion, pain, growth, and eventually resilience. Fame arrived before she had the tools to understand it. When she stepped into the role in the Brady Bunch, she wasn't just acting. She was shaping a cultural ideal. Marsha Brady wasn't written as flawed or uncertain. She was confident, admired, and often the center of attention. For a young actress, living inside that character blurred the line between performance and expectation. The world didn't just want to watch Marsha Brady. It wanted Maureen McCormick to be her. That expectation followed her everywhere. At school events, in interviews, in public appearances, people spoke to her as if she were the character. They praised her hair, her smile, her personality, assuming it was effortless. But inside, she felt the growing pressure to maintain that illusion. Every insecurity felt amplified because she believed she wasn't allowed to show it. Meanwhile, the late 1960s and early 1970s were a time of cultural change. Television was evolving, but family sitcoms still promoted idealized values. Sherwood Schwartz designed the show to emphasize harmony and optimism. That meant the cast, especially McCormick, became ambassadors of that image. She wasn't just acting, she was representing a lifestyle. As she entered her teenage years, the contrast between image and reality intensified. Her home environment remained unstable. Her mother's mental health struggles created unpredictability. Her father's strict religious beliefs added pressure. She often felt she had to hold everything together emotionally. For someone already performing perfection publicly, that internal burden became overwhelming. She began searching for escape. Initially, it was emotional withdrawal, isolating herself, doubting her identity. Later, it became experimentation with substances. She described how drugs dulled the constant anxiety. They allowed her to step away from expectations, even briefly. But that relief came with consequences. While filming continued, she maintained professionalism. Cameras never captured the struggle. That duality, smiling on screen while battling internally, defined her experience. It also deepened her confusion about who she really was. Was she the confident Marsha Brady, or the uncertain young woman hiding behind the character? When the show ended, the transition felt like stepping off a moving train. The structure disappeared overnight. No more regular filming. No more built-in identity. She expected new opportunities, but Hollywood's perception didn't evolve. Casting directors saw nostalgia, not transformation. She was invited to guest appearances, but rarely offered leading dramatic roles. Her appearances on Happy Days, Fantasy Island, and The Love Boat kept her visible, yet reinforced her association with light entertainment. She wanted something deeper, a chance to prove range. But breaking typecasting is notoriously difficult, especially for child stars. The audition for Midnight Express represented hope. The role required emotional intensity, vulnerability, and maturity. She prepared thoroughly, determined to redefine herself. When she lost the role, it felt like confirmation that she might never escape the shadow of Marsha Brady. The rejection hit harder than usual because it symbolized lost identity. During this period, addiction intensified. She later described how substances became a coping mechanism rather than recreation. The pressure of maintaining a public image while privately struggling created emotional exhaustion. Professional opportunities became inconsistent. Reliability concerns emerged. Hollywood, always cautious, began distancing itself. She returned to Brady-related projects, including reunion specials. These projects provided income and visibility but reinforced typecasting. Each appearance reminded audiences of the character she was trying to move beyond. It became a paradox. The very thing that sustained her career also limited it. Eventually, the consequences became undeniable. She sought help. Recovery required confronting years of denial. Therapy helped her explore the roots of her anxiety, childhood instability, fame pressure, identity confusion. She began separating herself from the character that defined her youth. Her memoir later revealed details that surprised many fans. She spoke openly about addiction, depression, and the difficulty of growing up under public scrutiny. The honesty shifted perception. Audiences began viewing her not just as a nostalgic icon, but as someone who endured significant personal challenges. Over time, she rebuilt her life. She appeared in television projects, reality shows, and interviews. These appearances weren't about reclaiming stardom, but about sharing perspective. She embraced her past while redefining her present. The focus shifted from perfection to authenticity. Her story resonates because it reflects a broader reality. Child stars often face identity struggles. Early fame freezes public perception. Personal growth becomes complicated when audiences resist change. McCormick's experience illustrates that dynamic vividly. Today, Marsha Brady remains an enduring symbol of 1970s television. But behind that symbol is a human journey filled with vulnerability. McCormick's resilience transformed her narrative from one of silent struggle to one of openness and recovery. The girl with the perfect smile turned out to be searching for herself. The character who seemed flawless concealed a person learning through mistakes. And the actress once defined by a single role ultimately defined herself through honesty. In the end, the legacy isn't just about nostalgia. It's about survival. It's about rediscovering identity after losing it. It's about stepping beyond the role that shaped a generation. Because Marsha Brady belonged to television history, but Maureen McCormick's real story was about becoming whole again.